Okay, so our final talk in this session is Dr. Yves Millemann, Subclinical Hypocalcemia in French dairy cows, study in a veterinary practice in the department of the Ardennes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we'll finish this part of the morning with this presentation, which will be on a quite modest study. First, I wish to thank the organizers for having given me the opportunity to present it today. So we will focus on what has been already presented in the introductory talk by Jesse Goff on subclinical hypocalcemia that we wanted to look for in French dairy cows. And for that purpose, we carried out a study in a veterinary practice situated in the northern eastern part of France in a département named the Ardennes with the help of some students with a veterinary from this veterinary practice and the Obgyn company. Okay, so I will follow this outline. After a short introduction, I will present you the aims of our study, and then I will focus on our materials and methods, and present our results in terms of prevalence that we will found on subclinical hypocalcemia. We will also focus on the evolution of such a condition around the calving and look for a possible association with postpartum diseases in our sample. So, briefly, all of you know that at calving in dairy cows, normally cows experience hypocalcemia, which is quite physiological, but depending on the level of hypocalcemia, the animals may experience either a subclinical hypocalcemia that has been already presented this morning with a serum calcium, which will be at a concentration under 80 milligram per liter, or depending on authors, 85 milligram per liter, and which is normally asymptomatic, even if it can lead to multiple possible adverse consequences. And this condition has been detected in the USA, as it has already been presented before, in up to a quarter of heifers and half of multipalorous cows. If the serum calcium concentration decreases up to under 55 milligram per liter, then you may have clinical signs with milk fever and a Downer syndrome. This condition affects about 5 to 8% of dairy cows annually. As it has been already presented also before, hypocalcemia may lead to a number of adverse consequences. Well, this slide is not as complex of the slides that you saw before, but I would like to emphasize the fact that this hypocalcemia, even if it is subclinical, can lead to a decreased efficacy of the immune system, which can lead to an increased risk of postpartum diseases, which are listed here on the right of the slide, including dystocia, uterine prolapses, retained placenta, metritis, mastitis, displacement of hypomycin, and ketosis. And altogether, subclinical hypocalcemia has been shown to be to lead to 4 times more expensive, to be 4 times more expensive per year than milk fever globally. What were the aims of our study? First, we wanted to determine if subclinical hypocalcemia could be found also in France. To date, there is no paper on this condition in our country. We wanted also to have an idea of the apparent prevalence of subclinical hypocalcemia in our dairy herds. We planned also to look for the risk factors for this condition and to look also for the consequences and to the possible association between these consequences with subclinical hypocalcemia, and look also to an interesting threshold of subclinical hypocalcemia before calving. So, for that purpose, we planned our study in a department situated in the northeastern part of France here, named Ardennes. We considered a cow to be hypocalcemic when it was under 80 milligram per liter at the day of calving. The study was conducted between August and November 2014, and a number of 106 Holstein cows were recruited out of 8 dairy herds, consisting in between 15 and 115 cows, which are the quite normal size of dairy herds in France. All the samples are listed here on the this was our design of our study with calcium samples at different times. We also made a number of evaluation of body constitution score, Riemann-Field score, etc. But I will just focus on calcium serum results today with the possible association with postpartum diseases. So, as a result, we can see here that we found a quite high proportion of the cows that experienced subclinical hypocalcemia. Up to 45% of all the cows were hypocalcemic with a subclinical hypocalcemia on the day of calving, with 57% of multiparous cows that exhibited such a subclinical hypocalcemia, while only 16% of primiparous cows, heifers, if you prefer, that were exhibiting subclinical hypocalcemia. These proportions are quite close to those that have been already presented in the USA. If we look more further in the results varying by herd, as you can see here, we had quite huge differences between herds, with a prevalence or a proportion of the cows exhibiting subclinical hypocalcemia between 29% and 17%. So quite huge differences between herds. And if we look more further at the results regarding the parity, as you can see here, whatever the cow was of the parity number 2, 3, 4, or 5, there were not any significant difference, but there was a huge significant difference between primiparous cows and multiparous cows. No, not surprisingly, the animals that were found to be to exhibit a subclinical hypocalcemia produced more milk during the first month of lactation than what we called healthy cows, with about 5 kilograms more milk during the first month of lactation, but no difference was found regarding the milk quality. If we look at the evolution of the proportion of cows exhibiting subclinical hypocalcemia during calving, we first must emphasize that we found some animals that exhibited subclinical hypocalcemia before calving, and in the cows that exhibited such subclinical hypocalcemia before calving, we found that the subclinical hypocalcemia after calving lasted quite longer than in other cows. But as you can see, we just had 100 cows in our sample, so this was just a trend. This has to be verified afterwards. Around calving, in animals that were found to be hypocalcemic at calving, serum calcium was significantly lower before and after calving, and cows experiencing subclinical hypocalcemia returned to normal serum calcium after 4 days postpartum, as you can see here on the right of the figure. One point that we would like to emphasize is the fact that more than 80% of the cows that had a calcemia under 90 milligrams per liter before calving had or experienced subclinical hypocalcemia at calving. Perhaps this threshold value will be interesting on the field to predict subclinical hypocalcemia. Now, what about the association of subclinical hypocalcemia with postpartum diseases? With this threshold that we chose of 80 milligrams per liter, we had cows that were classified as subclinical hypocalcemic and healthy cows. And you can see here the possible diseases, postpartum diseases that they were experiencing: metritis, mastitis, retained placenta, ketosis, or at least one of these 4 diseases. And as you can see here, we had a trend of cows experiencing subclinical hypocalcemia to have more often retained placenta, or at least one of the 4 studied diseases. So probably because our sample was not that high, we were not able to have significant results, but we hypothesized that with more cows, we would be able to find such a result. One more result that would be interesting. If we look at the animals exhibiting, with subclinical hypocalcemia, exhibiting one of the 4 diseases, and the animals with the normal hypocalcemia exhibited also one of these diseases, you can see that depending on the threshold that you would apply, you would have, for instance, 2 more animals presenting such a condition. So if you look at this table, you could say that at 83 milligrams per liter, you have a trend to have most often postpartum diseases, and that when you choose this trend, this threshold of 75 milligrams per liter, then you have significantly more often postpartum diseases in these animals. To conclude, with our little study, we evidenced for the first time subclinical hypocalcemia on dairy herds in France, and evidenced a kind of correlation between subclinical hypocalcemia and the 4 postpartum diseases I presented on the slides before. We have found also what could be an interesting threshold predicting the occurrence of subclinical hypocalcemia afterwards with 83 milligrams per liter. And we also found in our study that a serum calcium value before calving under 90 milligrams per liter could be potentially predictive of subclinical hypocalcemia at calving. Naturally, these results have to be assessed also with other field studies with a huge or a higher number of animals in order to improve prevention. Thank you for your attention.